So far, your thoughts on it's only been 2 games. He didn't play since Christmas. What have you thought of Luka Doncic so far as a Laker?
I think it's been awesome. Like I don't want to overcomplicate it. Like the 14 points was tied for his fewest points in a game in like the 14 points in his debut was tied for his fewest points in a game in the past 4 years. So that just shows you how high
He's washed.
his
He's
floor
washed. He's
is.
done.
I mean, I think that there's naturally going to be an adjustment period. As you mentioned, had been out for 6 weeks, is still dealing with getting back from the calf strain, is on a minutes restriction, and is on a brand new team with a brand new offense. And yes, he's played with a couple of these guys before, but for the most part, brand new players. And there was a play last night where he has the ball on the left side of the floor, Austin's on the right side, and he goes to throw Austin a pass, and Austin cuts, and the pass goes out of bounds. And it was like, that's just a simple misread there. But I don't even put that on Luka, and I don't put that on Austin. I just put that on like their lack of experience together.
Sure.
Luka thought, he's used to that player just standing there, and he's gonna swing the ball to the other side of the floor. Austin was, I'm getting ready to cut, and this is my movement to start my cut, and I start my cut, and then Luka throws the pass. So I think like mistakes like that are just going to be part of this process. I think, I mean, the pass he had to Austin going downhill, throwing a behind the back pass.
Stupid.
Like most behind the back passes are stationary, right? Like you'll see guys around the elbow, and like Jokic does it, LeBron does it, where they hit the cutter with the Arvydas Sabonis, behind the back pass. Luka's getting downhill, draws 2 guys, and just flicks the ball behind his back all the way
On the money.
15, 20 feet back to Austin in his shooting pocket, and he hits an open 3. His only 3 of the night for what it was worth. But it was like, that's a ridiculous pass. And one thing I've been like, you see how Luka's, he goes at his own speed. He's really good at decelerating. And like the strength on those drives, like he's driving through the paint. Teams are kind of freaking out. Like, is he going to pass? Is he going to pull up? Is he going to get to the rim? And then guys start to try and swipe at the ball. And he's so strong that like some guys, they get downhill, they expose the ball, you could smack it out. Not Luka. Like he has the death grip on the ball. And then like he had that one nice finish where he goes past a couple of Jazz guys and then finishes at the rim. And like last night he led the team in usage percentage. It increased by about 5% from the first game. He did have some more turnovers, what was last on the team in plus minus, but like, I don't want to overcomplicate or overthink the situation. I don't want to bet against Luka Doncic. Like I already had last night on my live, people asking, should the Lakers regret the trade? Should they have kept Max at AD? And it's like, well, AD's out for at least a month.
Sure.
And might be out for the rest of the season. So I think if the alternative would have potentially been bad with that. But like, you got Luka Doncic, and really this move was just as much about this season as it was about the future. So I think he deserves some time, and let's see what Luka looks like 5, 7, 10 games in. And then if people want to, overreact or criticize the move, give it some time. So I want to see a larger sample size, but I've been impressed with it's different. I think when you're acclimating a big piece compared to like a Dorian Finney-Smith just comes in, he spaces the floor, he rebounds, he boxes out, he defends. Like it's a pretty simple. He's a plug and play player. Luka is like, you're building a whole offense around him.
100%.
He's going to be your primary ball handler. Like that takes some time. It's not an overnight thing. And then on top of it, I think obviously it's kind of like new school vibes where, first day of school, first week, you're always on your best behavior, right? And you're getting to know everybody, and you're on your best behavior with the teacher or whatever. But I think we'll start to see like the real Luka as he gets more comfortable with his teammates, as they get more comfortable with him. Guys have talked about not being ready for his passes sometimes, and like that they feel like they're in a part of the court where he can't see them or he can't reach them with the pass, and then all of a sudden they're getting whipped a pass on the other side of the floor, and it's like that takes some time too. So I think this is a process that's going to take a little bit of time. It's not an overnight thing. And already I think there's been a lot of encouraging things offensively, but I want to give it a couple more weeks, and then we can really start to be more critical with it.
Yeah, somebody put in the chat a little bit earlier, said that by mid-March, we'll have a great idea what Luka looks like,
Yes.
right? And I think that's actually it's a perfect window. They're going to have the next. You got 2 games before you got to the break. You got this 1 week off. He's mentioned it yesterday. Obviously, you're there about the mental break will be good for him. And then all of a sudden, you're back into the most important stretch of the season, right? As you're kind of starting to position yourself for the playoffs. And they got some phenomenal matchups coming up. I mean, you're going to face Denver 3 times in the next month. You got Clippers 2 times. You got, I think, New York at Boston. Like, there's going to be some really fun games. Minnesota's in that mix. Phoenix is in that mix. It's going to be some fun games. And I think, like you said, the more comfortable he gets, the bigger the games become, the real version of Luka you're going to get. And he also wasn't playing since December 25th. So I'm sure there's some rust there. I'm sure there's, some other things as well. I know conditioning has that conversation keeps coming up as well. Hopefully in the next 30 days as well, he feels like his body is where it needs to be. We'll end it with this. And I want to get your thoughts on it because I think we can make as many predictions as we can. Whatever we think this team is, I think it's, you mentioned it. Usually when a trade goes down and you get in the middle of the season, you're kind of just working around the edges. The Lakers literally tore down a house and they put a new foundation in, which is so odd in the middle of the season. So I know what Denver is. I know what Memphis is. I know what OKC is. I know what Houston is. Like there's a 50, 60 game sample size of those teams together, or there's a few years together of a sample size. I just want your thoughts on both sides of this. How dangerous do you think the Lakers can be? And how much of a question mark? It's like there's really no way of predicting what this team is going to be because they were all just put together in the last week or so.
How dangerous they could be. I mean, I continue to say I view this team as, I think right now I'd tentatively peg them at, if I was doing a league-wide rankings, I'd probably put them 6th. But I think that's probably their floor. And I'm not going to move them much lower, if at all. If anything, I'm only going to move them higher. I think Boston, OKC, and Cleveland to me are the tier 1 contenders that are on their own, on their own, in their own
scale,
group.
Yep.
Scale, whatever, I guess tier. And then I think the Lakers are in that next mix with Denver, with New York, Milwaukee, Memphis, Houston. I think that's kind of a little bit of a broader tier of maybe 4 or 5 teams. And I would put the Lakers close to the top of that tier. And I think they have the potential to be at the top of that tier. And I'm going to be very interested in watching the Denver matchups very closely because I think aside from OKC, I think OKC, because they're young, because they haven't really done it before, I think a lot of people are doubting them, but they're having a historic regular season from a net rating perspective. They're blowing everybody out. They have an elite defense. They have probably the likely MVP in Shea. OKC is going to be a tough out. But aside from them, I think the Lakers can beat anybody else in the West. I do have some questions with the Denver matchup, and I want to see, how does Jackson Hayes guard Nikola Jokic, or do they put LeBron on him, or
Sure.
Rui, or how do they handle that matchup moving forward now that AD is out of the mix? But to your point about the question mark, it is interesting because if you go through NBA history, off the top of my head, and I have thought about this before, the last time a team made a huge midseason trade and won the championship, again, off the top of my head, is probably the 2004 Pistons with Rasheed Wallace. And that's going back 21 years. And if you look at everything else, sure, teams have made maybe smaller moves or they had a buyout guy or something, but a identity changing, starting lineup changing. Rasheed, I think there were parts of that run where he was their second or third best player between, it was him, Chauncey, Ben Wallace, Rip, so depending on the matchup. His numbers weren't always the best, but you knew what type of impact Rasheed Wallace was making. That might be the last time a team made that big of a move. Because again, kind of quickly going through it, I can't, the Lakers made the Pau Gasol trade, but then they won it the year after. They didn't win it the year they made the Pau Gasol trade, right? Yep. So the Heat add I mean, and that's not even at the deadline, but like the Heat add LeBron and Bosch, they don't win it the first year. I guess Golden State adding KD, but that was also an off-season move. They had a full season. So like a mid-season acquisition, I cannot remember a like star level player being added and that team winning the championship. And I think the reason that is just because it is such a shift with your team, with your identity. And the Lakers are they played 2 games with Luka. There's 30 more games. So at most, if he stays healthy the rest of the season, doesn't rest, doesn't have a little nick or whatever, he's going to play 32 games with this group going into the playoffs. Like,
it's nothing.
That is not a big sample
Nothing.
size. That's less than half the season. So that's the concern, I guess, moving forward. But this group has been playing at such a high level. Again, I know there's some gloom and disappointment after last night's loss, but like this group had won 12 of 15. They've been a top 4 team in the league for basically a month. And I think it's going to take some time to acclimate Luka, but once they acclimate him, I think this is going to be a really scary team that, look, I don't want to face Luka Doncic and LeBron James in a 7-game series. I don't care who else is on the floor. I don't care, what the context is. Like, those 2 guys are killers. Those 2 guys both raise their game in the playoffs, and they both have supercomputer minds. They both are smart with game planning. Like, I don't want to play those 2 guys in a 7-game series if I'm anybody. So I think that gives the Lakers a shot, at least a puncher's chance against anybody in a 7-game series.
All right, thank you very much for watching the clip. Just want to give a shout out here to one of our partners, the Wallace Firm. They are official injury attorney of the Sliwa Show and Hoops Talk, the entire channel. If you are ever in a need, and I hope you're not, but some type of serious injury with yourself or a family member of yours, I would like to personally help you by introducing you to the best in the business, Brad Wallace and the Wallace Firm. Also got a URL out here that you can use as well. Just go to wallacewins.com/Sliwa. Thank you for their partnership, and thank you for being a part of the Sliwa Show.